You are lying on the floor outside your parents' study at 1:23 in the morning, wrapped in a blanket you dragged from the couch, pretending to be asleep because children are not supposed to be awake when adults are wrestling with sentences. The house is dark except for one rectangle of yellow light under the office door. Behind it, the world is being invented. You hear the chair creak. A mug touches the desk. Fingers tap the keyboard, stop, tap again, stop longer, then attack the keys like the sentence has finally confessed. Somewhere in the room, paper shifts. A pen scratches. Your parent mutters one word, rejects it, tries another, then laughs quietly at something nobody else in the house can see. Outside, the neighborhood is asleep. Inside, dragons are being named, lovers are being separated, detectives are realizing the clue was in Chapter 3, queens are losing kingdoms, astronauts are missing Earth, and one stubborn paragraph is refusing to behave. Then the door opens. Your parent steps into the hallway with tired eyes, messy hair, and the expression of someone who has just returned from a country that does not appear on maps. They see you on the floor. You freeze. They do not send you back to bed immediately. Instead, they hold up one finger, disappear into the kitchen, and return with a glass of water and a cookie you both pretend is medically necessary. Then they sit beside you in the hallway and whisper, "I figured it out." You do not know what it is. A plot turn. A character. A final line. A betrayal. A joke. A death. A door. But you understand the emotion. Victory. Not loud victory. Not stadium victory. Writer victory. The kind that happens in pajamas, under bad lighting, after 6 hours of despair and one good sentence. Most children think magic is something in fairy tales. You learn early that magic is something your parent makes at a desk while the rest of the world is sleeping. Go back 8 years. You arrive in a home already full of books, half-finished notebooks, coffee mugs, index cards, unpaid invoices, old drafts, new drafts, marked-up pages, literary magazines, receipts used as bookmarks, and one terrifying stack of papers your parent insists is organized, even though it looks like a small civilization collapsed on the dining table. Your first lullaby is not just humming. It is typing. Soft, uneven, constant. Your parent writes during naps, between meals, after bedtime, before deadlines, during storms, during flu season, during holidays, during financial panic, and during what other people call free time. Your other parent, if there is one in the house, becomes fluent in the strange domestic weather of writing life. They learn when to bring tea, when not to ask how the chapter is going, when to celebrate, when to leave the room, and when the sentence "I'm almost done" means dinner will be 2 hours late. In a writer's family, time does not move normally. It expands when the work is flowing. It collapses when a deadline appears. It vanishes completely when your parent says, "I just need to fix one paragraph." Other kids grow up thinking a closed door means someone wants privacy. You grow up knowing a closed door might mean someone is building a city, ruining a marriage, inventing a monster, or trying to remember whether the character in Chapter 2 had green eyes or gray. At 4, you know not to touch the notebook. Not because anyone explains intellectual property to you. Because the notebook has an aura. It sits on the table like a sleeping animal. You may touch crayons. You may touch cereal. You may touch the dog, who is patient beyond reason. But the notebook belongs to the deep adult world of ideas, and even your sticky little hands understand there are borders. At 5, you believe every family has a shelf called the dangerous shelf. Yours contains books you are not old enough to read but old enough to be curious about. Books with strange covers. Books with titles that sound like warnings. Books your parent says you can read later, which immediately makes them more powerful than toys. At 6, you realize your parent can make people cry without being in the same room. A letter arrives. Or an email. Or a message from someone your parent has never met. The person says the book helped them survive something. Or made them feel less alone. Or reminded them of someone they loved. Or made them laugh on a day when laughing felt impossible. Your parent reads it quietly. Then reads it again. Then folds into a chair with the look of someone who has been touched through the wall of the world. That is when you understand, in a child's blurry way, that writing is not just stories. It travels. It enters houses. It sits beside strangers. It says things people needed before they knew how to ask. That is a wild thing to have for a family business. Not a store. Not an office. Not a factory. A portal. Your childhood is not measured only in birthdays. It is measured in drafts. First draft. Second draft. Clean draft. Final draft. The draft that makes your parent cheerful. The draft that makes your parent stare out the window like civilization has failed. The draft printed at midnight because reading on paper changes the brain, which may or may not be true but sounds serious enough that nobody argues. Your parents' work does not have the shape of normal work. There is no uniform. No time clock. No simple explanation at school career day. What does your parent do? They write books. The class thinks this means your parent is either famous or unemployed. Sometimes, financially, the difference feels thinner than anyone wants to admit. But at home, you know the truth. Writing is not laziness. Writing is not floating around waiting for inspiration while sunlight lands beautifully on a notebook. Writing is work so invisible people mistake it for dreaming. It is sitting down when nothing wants to be written. It is deleting 10 pages and still making lunch. It is hearing that must be fun from people who have never spent 3 days losing a fight to a paragraph. It is finishing something nobody asked for yet because some private fire inside you refuses to go out. Your education is not exactly standard. Yes, you go to school. You learn spelling. You learn fractions. You learn how to stand in a line, which seems to be one of childhood's most repeated civic duties. But the real education begins at home. Lesson 1, the first idea is rarely the best idea. Lesson 2, a character can lie, but the story cannot. Lesson 3, if someone says, be honest, what do you think, prepare for danger. Your parent does not give advice like a normal adult. They give advice like someone who has spent years studying motives, secrets, and the terrible beauty of people doing things they do not understand. Pay attention to what people avoid saying. Never trust a perfect story. Everyone wants something. The villain thinks they are the hero. Details are how truth sneaks into the room. These are not cute little sayings in your house. They are tools. Your parent watches conversations the way a hunter watches tracks in snow. At restaurants, they notice the couple that stops talking when the waiter arrives. The man who laughs half a second too late. The woman who touches her necklace every time money is mentioned. The old friends who remember the same event completely differently and are both somehow telling the truth. You grow up beside someone who collects human behavior like other people collect souvenirs. This makes you a strange child. Interesting. But strange. At school, while other children simply say a teacher is mean, you wonder what made her that way. Was she always like this? Did something happen? Does she go home and sing beautifully while making soup? Does she have a secret dream of running a flower shop in Vermont? You do not know where Vermont is. But it feels like the kind of place an exhausted teacher might start over. That is what happens when a writer raises you. Every person becomes a doorway. At 7, you discover the glory of book events. Not glamorous in the movie way. Better. Stranger. You are brought along to a library reading because childcare fell through and because your parent secretly likes having you there. The room smells like carpet, paper, coffee, and the particular hopefulness of people who brought tote bags. Chairs are lined up. A small table holds books stacked like little monuments. Someone has arranged cookies on a paper plate with more seriousness than the situation requires. Your parent stands at the front and reads aloud. And suddenly, the voice you know from arguments about socks and vegetables becomes another voice entirely. Clearer. Deeper. Charged. A room full of adults sits completely still because your parent is telling them what happened to people who are not real and yet, somehow, matter. You look around. Nobody is checking their phone. Nobody is asking for snacks. Nobody is interrupting. Your parent has done something miraculous. They have made adults listen. Afterward, strangers line up. They hold books against their chests like the books are warm. They tell your parent things. Private things. Too private, honestly. One woman cries. One man says the ending broke him. Someone asks where the ideas come from, and your parent smiles the polite smile all writers use when they are too tired to explain that ideas come from living, worrying, noticing, stealing from the weather, and suffering professionally. You stand near the signing table eating a cookie and feeling like you are part of a royal court made entirely of introverts. Other kids go to sports games and watch crowds scream. You go to readings and watch silence become applause. At 8, you learn that writers have enemies. Not dramatic enemies with swords. Worse. Reviews. Deadlines. Taxes. Plot holes. Bad Wi-Fi. Well-meaning relatives. The sentence that worked yesterday and is embarrassing today. The middle of the book, which your parent describes with the same tone other people use for natural disasters. There are days when your parent moves through the house glowing because the work is alive. On those days, the coffee tastes better. Music plays. Dinner becomes experimental. Your parent tells jokes, answers emails, and looks at the ceiling as if angels are sending usable dialogue through the vents. Then there are days when the book is dead. Or at least accused of being dead. On those days, the house becomes quieter. Your parent walks around in old clothes, opens the refrigerator without taking anything, closes it, opens it again, and says, I may have ruined the whole thing. You learn not to panic. The book is always ruined. Until it isn't. That is one of the secret lessons of growing up in a writer's house. Despair is part of the schedule. It does not mean the work is failing. Sometimes it means the work is about to become real. At 9, you begin to notice the family rituals. The deadline ritual. The entire house becomes a support system for one person battling invisible wolves. Meals get simple. Errands are delayed. Everyone learns to speak softly. Your parents' desk disappears under papers, mugs, sticky notes, highlighters, and snacks that suggest both ambition and nutritional collapse. The submission ritual. Your parent sends something away and then tries to act normal, which they do by becoming extremely abnormal. They clean a closet. They reorganize spices. They check email every 7 minutes. They say they are not thinking about it while thinking about nothing else. The acceptance ritual. A phone call. An email. A gasp from the office. Then joy breaks open in the house. Not tidy joy. Not graceful joy. The wild, relieved joy of someone being told the door opened. The rejection ritual. Quieter. But not empty. Your parent reads the message, nods like they expected it, says something mature, then later becomes furious at a spoon for being in the wrong drawer. You learn that artistic life gives you emotions with nowhere dignified to put them. And somehow, that makes your parents seem more heroic. Not because they never get knocked down. Because they keep returning to the desk. There is also the style. Let's not pretend writers do not have style. They do. It just rarely looks like money. Writer style is sweaters with history. Pens chosen with unreasonable devotion. Tote bags from bookstores in cities they barely remember. Shelves arranged in a system nobody else can decode. Reading glasses that migrate around the house like tiny intellectual pets. Coffee mugs with quotes, stains, and emotional value far beyond market price. Your parent may not own a sports car. But they own first editions, signed copies, fountain pens, battered paperbacks with notes in the margins, and one chair that is absolutely not to be moved because it has the correct thinking angle. Some families pass down jewelry. Yours passes down sentences. A phrase your parent loved. A line from a poem. A joke from a dead novelist. A family story sharpened over years until it has perfect timing. By 10, you understand that your house is different from other houses. In your friends' homes, adults ask normal dinner questions. How was school? Did you finish your homework? Who wants more potatoes? In your house, dinner can turn into a debate about whether a ghost story needs a ghost, whether revenge is ever satisfying, whether a narrator can be charming and evil, whether a memoirist is allowed to make dialogue smoother than real life, and whether the neighbor across the street is secretly unhappy or just bad at curtains. You are not raised around small talk. You are raised around subtext. This makes ordinary conversations feel slightly undercooked. A classmate says, "I'm fine," and you hear 3 chapters hiding behind it. A teacher says, "Interesting choice," and you understand immediately that this is not praise. A relative says, "We should get together sometime," and you know this means never, unless guilt becomes aggressive. Language, in your house, is not decoration. It is evidence. At 11, you begin to appreciate the backstage world of books. Before that, you thought a book was written, printed, and placed on a shelf by some elegant natural process, like fruit ripening. Then you see the machinery. Agents. Editors. Copy editors. Publicists. Designers. Booksellers. Blurbs. Contracts. Covers. Catalogs. Launch dates. Sales numbers. Revisions that arrive in documents full of comments so detailed they look like the book has been gently attacked by an intelligent swarm. You learn that a book is not one person alone in a room. It begins that way, yes. But eventually it becomes a small village of people arguing about commas, covers, pacing, titles, page counts, marketing copy, and whether readers will understand that the dog is symbolic but also just a dog. Your parent complains about the process. Constantly. Then defends it fiercely when someone outside the process insults it. That is how you know it matters. At 12, your parent lets you read something before anyone else. This is a sacred promotion. You are handed pages with the seriousness of a royal document. Tell me if it's boring, they say. This is too much power for a child. You sit on your bed and read slowly, aware that the person who makes your lunch also made these people, these rooms, these secrets. You recognize nothing directly and everything emotionally. A house that is not your house feels familiar. A character who is not your parent says something your parent would never say but somehow clearly thought. A child in the story notices something you have noticed too. You feel proud. Then frightened. Because now you must give feedback. You say you liked it. Your parent asks where you got bored. This is the terrifying thing about writers. They do not only want praise. They want useful truth. You mention one scene. Your parent goes still. Not angry. Listening. Real listening. The kind adults rarely give children. Then they nod, make a note, and later the scene changes. That is when you feel it. Your opinion entered the work. A tiny fingerprint. Invisible to everyone else. But you know. By 13, you are old enough to be embarrassed by the writer lifestyle. Your parent carries books everywhere. Everywhere. To the doctor's office. To the beach. To weddings. To parking lots. To family events where they should be socializing but are instead reading a novel near a lamp like a moth with opinions. They talk to themselves in public. They stop walking to write down a phrase. They ask waiters strange questions in the name of research. They once spent 20 minutes examining an old door because the house in the book has this exact mood, which is not a sentence a teenager wants to hear while hungry. Your parent does not always dress like other parents. Sometimes they arrive at school events looking polished and interesting. Other times they appear wearing what can only be described as deadline clothing, soft, shapeless, morally uncertain, and accompanied by the haunted expression of someone who has not looked in a mirror since Tuesday. You are mortified. Then, secretly, proud. Because other parents seem trapped inside ordinary adult roles. Your parent seems to have tunnels under reality. At 14, you realize writers are dangerous in a way nobody warns you about. They remember everything. Not always birthdays. Not always where they put the keys. Not always whether they already bought milk. But the strange important things? They remember those. The exact sentence someone used when they lied. The weather on the day a friendship changed. The look on your face when you pretended not to care. The way your grandmother held a glass at a wedding when someone mentioned your grandfather. The joke your uncle made because he was trying not to cry. A writer's memory is not a filing cabinet. It is a trapdoor. Years later, something falls through it and lands in a story wearing a fake mustache. This teaches you caution. In a writer's house, nothing is wasted. Not heartbreak. Not boredom. Not bad vacations. Not embarrassing relatives. Not the argument in the grocery store. Not the weird man at the gas station who said, "People think pigeons don't know things," and then left without explaining. Everything might become material. Even you. Especially you. This is both terrifying and flattering. At 15, you work your first book launch. Not officially. But family officially means unpaid labor with snacks. You help set up chairs. You arrange books in a stack. You tape a sign to a wall. You stand near the table trying to look useful. Your parent is nervous in a way that seems absurd because they wrote the book. Surely writing the book was the hard part. You learn that releasing a book is not like finishing a race. It is like building a boat alone and then inviting everyone to watch you push it into the water. The room fills. Friends arrive. Strangers arrive. People from your parents' past appear carrying complicated emotional history under polite smiles. Your parent reads. Answers questions. Signs books. Laughs in the right places. Receives compliments. Receives one comment so weird your family discusses it for 3 years. Afterward, when everyone leaves, the room is suddenly full of empty cups, folded chairs, receipt slips, and the strange quiet after attention has moved on. Your parent stands by the table, exhausted and shining. Not celebrity shining. Something better. Maker shining. They made a thing. The thing left the house. People came to meet it. That night, you understand why your parent keeps doing this even when it is hard, uncertain, underpaid, overexposed, and occasionally humiliating. Because making something out of nothing and then watching it become real is a kind of power most people never get to feel. At 16, you start noticing how the writing life shaped your family. Vacations are never just vacations. They are research trips with sunscreen. A normal walk through a town becomes location scouting. A museum becomes a future scene. A train ride becomes notes about strangers. A storm becomes atmosphere. A weird hotel becomes a possible murder setting, even if your parent does not write mysteries. Your family does not simply visit places. You absorb them. The smell of rain on pavement in Boston. The color of hotel carpets in Prague. The way a waitress in New Orleans says honey like a legal category. The silence of a desert road. The sadness of an airport at dawn. The thrill of a city seen from a bus window when everyone else is tired but your parent is staring out like the world just handed them a paragraph. This is one of the true luxuries of being a writer's kid. You learn that life is made of texture. Not just events. Texture. The chipped blue paint on a door. The sound of ice in a glass. The way adults look when they think children are not watching. The particular smell of a library basement. The silence after someone says the wrong name at dinner. You grow up rich in noticing. That kind of richness does not show up in bank accounts. But it changes every room you enter. At 17, you begin to understand the loneliness. Not yours. Your parents'. Writing looks romantic from the outside because people imagine the finished book. The beautiful cover. The signing line. The interview. The applause. The shelf. They do not see the long middle. The uncertainty. The private doubt.
The mornings when your parent sits down anyway.
The years when nobody cares yet.
The edits that hurt because they are correct. The reviews that miss the point. The money that arrives late.
The comparison to other writers who seem to be winning some race your parent claims not to care about while absolutely caring.
You see the courage underneath the mess.
The simple brutality of returning to a blank page.
Again. 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 No audience. No guarantee. No applause.
Just the quiet belief that something worth saying might appear if you stay there long enough to receive it.
This changes how you define bravery. Bravery is not always running into fire. Sometimes bravery is writing the true sentence and not deleting it.
At 18, you are old enough to see the inheritance clearly. You may or may not become a writer.
That is not the point. By now, the house has already marked you. You have been raised to notice openings. To distrust simple answers. To hear when language is being used to hide instead of reveal. To understand that people are never only what they say they are.
To believe that a life can be transformed by paying attention.
Some people inherit discipline.
You inherit imagination with teeth.
Some people are taught to behave. You are taught to observe. Some people are told the world is the world. You are shown that the world is also a draft. It can be revised. A scene can turn. A person can change. A family story can be retold.
A painful thing can become language and, somehow, lose just enough poison to be held. That may be the greatest gift of being a writer's child. You learn that experience is not finished when it happens.
It can be shaped. Named. Questioned. Made useful. Made beautiful. Made bearable. Your parent does not just write stories.
They demonstrate that meaning is something people make by refusing to let life remain a pile of events.
Years later, someone will ask what it was like. They will expect you to say it was quiet. And yes, sometimes it was quiet. The house could go so silent you could hear the refrigerator thinking. They will expect you to say it was messy. And yes, absolutely.
There were piles of books on chairs, drafts on tables, pens in coat pockets, receipts with dialogue scribbled on the back, and at least one family meal delayed because your parents suddenly understood chapter 21. They will expect you to say it was unstable.
And yes, sometimes.
The writing life does not always arrive with steady checks, clear hours, or reasonable emotional weather.
But that is not what you remember first. You remember the enchantment. The door with light under it. The smell of coffee after midnight.
The sound of typing while rain hit the windows. Your parent reading a sentence aloud 3 different ways until the room itself seemed to choose.
You remember bookstores as holy places. Libraries as treasure rooms. Airports as character factories.
Old family stories as raw material. You remember sitting in the audience while your parent read words that once existed only in their head, and watching strangers lean forward like the words had hands. You remember your parent receiving a box of author copies and opening it with a knife too carefully, as if the books inside might startle. You remember touching the cover and realizing that an idea had become an object.
That is not normal. That is alchemy with page numbers. You remember bad reviews discussed with dignity in public and dramatic language in private. You remember good reviews printed out and left accidentally on the kitchen counter.
You remember your parent being recognized once in a bookstore and then pretending not to be thrilled for the rest of the day.
You remember the way rejection hurt and still did not win.
You remember the way the right word could improve the entire weather of the house.
That kind of childhood does something to you. It makes ordinary life feel louder with meaning. It makes you suspect every stranger has a hidden chapter.
It makes boredom almost impossible, because even boredom has texture if you look at it correctly.
It makes you understand that attention is a form of love.
It makes you careful with stories because you know they can rescue, distort, expose, comfort, wound, and outlive the people who told them.
It makes you respect anyone who can make something honest. A song. A meal. A house. A sentence. A life. Because once you have seen the cost of making things, you stop treating beauty like an accident. And yes, it can make you a little unbearable. You notice bad dialogue in movies. You complain when endings feel dishonest. You ask too many questions. You edit text messages in your head. You know that literally is almost never literally, and you suffer quietly because friendship requires mercy. But you also carry a secret advantage. You know that words are not weak. Words can open doors in people. Words can make a child feel known. Words can make a stranger stay alive one more night. Words can turn a private wound into a shared room with lights on. Words can take a person who feels alone and say, "No, someone else has been here too." That is not a small thing. That is power with a paperback cover. Being a writer's kid means you grow up near the strange engine that turns silence into meaning. You see the glamour and the embarrassment. The thrill and the invoices. The applause and the empty room after. The book tour and the laundry. The inspiration and the trash draft. The genius and the person standing in the kitchen at 11 p.m. asking if cereal counts as dinner. You see that art is not made by mythical creatures. It is made by tired people who keep caring. That knowledge is better than fantasy. It makes creativity feel possible. Not easy. Possible. And that may be the real inheritance. Not fame. Not a shelf of books with your family name on the spine, though that is cooler than anyone wants to admit. The inheritance is permission. Permission to look closely. Permission to feel deeply without drowning. Permission to turn confusion into questions. Permission to make something from the broken, funny, embarrassing, radiant material of being alive. Because before you were old enough to understand publishing, royalties, edits, agents, advances, reviews, or the terrible politics of book covers, you understood something more important. The world does not explain itself. Someone has to listen. Someone has to notice. Someone has to sit down in the dark and find the words. That is why it was incredible to be a writer's kid. Not because it was always peaceful. It was not. Not because every day was poetic. Many days were laundry, deadlines, leftovers, printer problems, and someone yelling, "Who moved my notes?" It was incredible because your childhood came with secret drafts, late-night breakthroughs, rooms full of books, strange adults at readings, emotional phone calls, sentences treated like treasure, and the daily proof that imagination is not escape from life. It is one of the ways people survive it. Because while other kids were told stories before bed, you grew up watching stories be born. Awkwardly. Messily. Bravely. One sentence at a time. And once you have seen that, once you have watched your parent pull a world out of silence and place it on a shelf where strangers can find it, ordinary reality never quite closes back up. There is always another layer. Another motive. Another version. Another page. Somewhere deep in you, long after childhood ends, you still carry that first lesson from the hallway outside the study. The house may be dark. The world may be asleep. The page may be blank. But behind one door, someone is still awake, still listening, still building a place where human life can finally say what it meant. And if you are lucky enough to grow up near that door, you never forget the sound. The chair creaking. The mug on the desk. The keys beginning again. And the quiet miracle of a person refusing to let the story disappear.